So hi, it's Maxine and Tara, and we are here to do your media horror training. Um, so we wanted to start to talk to you guys today about, um, how to contact media when you are being contacted by media, or maybe it's your first time doing any sort of media, blogging, twittering, talking about issues of the nation, the horror nation, the all the issues that we have to face today. Maybe you're an anonymous blogger, or maybe you are just in the comments section, or you're making public statements. You want to give some public testimony to legislators. You've got to first talk about and think about, well, who are you? What name are you going to want to use? What are the pros and cons of using the names, using your real name, any sort of social media that you already have? Your social media might be under your work name. You could have a stage name. You could have your real name. So Tara, do you want to talk a little bit about how to pick a name?
Yeah, I think you and I do it completely oppositely, but both in ways that work really well for us. So that hopefully can be a good example for people. So I think that the best thing to do is to not use your legal name unless you are like Maxine and you're fully aware of all of the risks and have decided to do it anyways. Which is great for people that works for. But for most people, I think when you use your real name, people can sometimes find your home. When you use your real name, in the future when you are trying to rent a place to live or applying for jobs, people will get on the Google and whatever you said to that reporter will pop up. So I think the best way to do it for a lot of people is to take your real name and just put your government name in a little bubble and keep it safe and out of the media. And I don't use a name that I've ever used for work either. I've just have, an activist persona that is different from my work name or my government name. Um, Using your work name, it does work really well for some people. Um, but it also, for a lot of people, it limits what you will be comfortable saying to the media, and it can attract people who are not customers sometimes to contact you in ways that you don't want to be contacted. um, and it can have bad effects going the other direction too, although for some people it works really well.
Yeah, so I don't use my work name ever in any of my activism or in any of my public, speaking out. I made the decision early on that I was going to use one name. And because I got my start doing radio, so it was much easier to, be able to say whatever you want in radio without having to show your face, or you could use a different name. But I decided to use one name because I knew I was going to be building a long-term media speaking out voice, and so I wanted to really bring all the credibility as possible to that one voice. So maybe in the beginning you are using different types of voices, depending on what outlet you're speaking in, and that's okay. Um, so some of the other things that you just want to think about is how to limit your risk. Are you somebody who's in the middle of a custody fight, and you are, say, doing protests out on the street, and you're speaking in front of the press, and then somehow that can come back and have a negative effect in your custody case. So, for me, I really limited my speaking out until like all my kids were gone out of the house and had graduated from college, before I started to speak out publicly and use my name. So some of the other things that you want to think about in how to identifying yourself in the public sphere, either on your blog, or if you're at a protest and having a microphone shoved in front of your faces, are you going to identify it as a current worker, a former worker, a sex worker, a prostitute, exotic dancer, or an escort? It's important to identify yourself in one way because that lets the public know you have some credibility, you have some specific personal knowledge on this topic and that you are an authority. Tara?
So it is important to pick how you're going to identify yourself and be a little consistent with that. And a lot of times, like, it can be, you might want to, like, feel like you need to be really honest, and there's a lot of details that can be involved in that, and then you're trying to explain to some reporter that, like, you used to do this but now you do that, but if you needed to do that you would, but if, and then sometimes you do phone sex too or whatever. And though that's just like falling down this rabbit hole that you don't need to go down the rabbit hole, and the reporter's just going to look at you like, why are you telling me all of this, right? um, so, do think about the liabilities in identifying however you're going to identify yourself, and just get used to, introducing yourself. Hi, I'm Tara Burns. I'm a former sex worker. Just get used to doing that. Um, I want to talk about the word prostitute. It's a word that has a very specific legal meaning, and it can be really useful to use that word when you're talking about laws and how laws are applied to people. So I know there's a lot of people that don't like the term prostitute, but if you're talking about a prostitution law, maybe consider how it might be useful or not to use that word.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. When you're talking about changing laws, there's no law right now that's against sex work. So those words all kind of intermix. And some other words you might want to think about not using is the word John. That word is pejorative, it's an epithet, and that's not how we want to speak about our customers. We want to talk about our customers in terms of being customers and clients, and talk about our movement in dignified ways. Because part of the claim to legitimacy has to do around those types of, what kinds of words we use. And sometimes we know that the words that we use when we're in circle together are the different words that we're not going to be using in public or in the public sphere, like on a blog or on Twitter or in the comments section or, in when you're, doing an actual interview. So, you got to think about what kind of words and what kind of risks that pose to you as a speaker. And you have to ask yourself some other questions like, what kind of value are you going to get out of doing this piece of media personally and professionally? What is your goal? In speaking out. My goal is always about I want to improve my own economic circumstances and work conditions, and I know that I need to improve everybody else's economic work situation too, because we don't exist in a vacuum, even though we might be working independently. So it's good to know what your primary purpose is around making any sort of public statements, in whatever venue that you are. And so you want to ask yourself, why am I speaking to this media anyway? Is this just a one-time speak out, or am I building a long-term goal and persona here and a voice? Those are important questions to ask yourself. Do you want to say a little bit more about that, Tara? Or?
Um, there was something I was gonna
Uh-huh.
say something about. Yeah, so sometimes we can have kind of conflicting goals when we talk to the media, right? So sometimes your goal might be to just like boost sex worker voices, boost sex worker representation, and sometimes your goal might be to change a law or to um, enlighten people about the effects of a particular policy. So sometimes, those different goals can have different, can lead you to different ways of presenting yourself. So, if your goal is to boost a certain reality or a certain narrative, you might speak in a way that's really natural to you. Whereas if your goal is to affect policy and to change laws, you might end up kind of playing into respectability politics and presenting yourself in a way that might not be the way that you would prefer to present yourself, but might work for the goal of changing policy. So it's good, I think, to figure out what your primary goal is and kind of keep your eye on the goal. um, and make sure that's what you're chasing.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Tara, about the politics of respectability. It can be a double-edged sword for us. But it can really, I really feel like I have worked that end of it, because then it makes it so that the public or the reporters, or the media people that I'm talking to, my audience, can't really get lost in any sort of details of, oh, she's just an old white worker who's been working for 25 years. What does she know about working the streets? Well, I have worked the streets. I've worked in a whole bunch of different venues, but you don't have to give that whole statement of, your whole resume, as you said before. But in some venues, it might really help to give that kind of basic information about yourself, and getting your name and your statement out there. Um, so some of the other questions you want to ask is, what value does doing this piece of media bring to our community? How is it just adding another chorus, another voice to the chorus? Is it bringing a new perspective on a piece of media that's already been published, of a particular viewpoint that hasn't been discussed that much? How can we help each other as media whores to be able to boost everybody's voice, and to bring some larger voices out there into the mainstream media? Because we're doing pretty good on the blogosphere, we're doing pretty good on the online media, but really we want to have our multicultural voices to be heard in a bunch of different venues, and the larger mainstream media, in terms of radio and TV and print news. So that brings the question is, who is your audience? Who are you talking to? Are you talking to other former workers? Are you talking to current workers? Are you talking to members of the public? If so, what part of the members of the public are you talking to? If you're in a part of the country where the majority of the say, for example, the voting population is extremely conservative, what can you say, or how can you craft your message and your talking points to be able to get through to that particular group? Or if you're talking to a group like in San Francisco that's already extremely savvy, they already know what the word decrim means. They want to know what's beyond decrim. So you have to be able to craft your message depending on who your audience is, and what delivery system that you are using. Are you using radio? Are you using TV? Is it a local radio show? Is it a syndicated radio show? Is it just a local TV show? Is it a local blogger, or is it a nationally known blogger? See, or is it you have to know who is interviewing you, what is the platform there, and what audience that platform generally talks to. Do you want to say a little bit more about that, Tara?
Yeah, so when a journalist contacts you, you should do, like you probably already do in a lot of interactions, and take control of the interaction right away. I like to ask them, so if a journalist contacts you, they probably already have a story in mind that they're going to write, and they're going to go ahead and write that story, and they're looking for the right person to give them the quotes that they're looking for. So your kind of first job is to find out, like, what is the story that they're trying to write? What narrative do they already have in mind? And you can ask them. I'll ask them a lot of times. I'll say, can you send me a link to a similar story you've done, or to another story you've done about marginalized people? So then you can see kind of what their ethics are. And then once you talk to them, as soon as you talk to a journalist, as soon as a journalist says to you, oh, can I interview you? And you say, sure, and start talking, you're on the record. They're probably recording you. Hopefully they're recording you and not just taking notes. And anything that you say, they can put in their article. And sometimes they will take something completely out of context. Like you could talk for an hour about one thing, and they'll take the 5 seconds that you talked about something else and stick it in there, right? So don't do that, especially with reporters that you don't know. Don't let them draw you into these really, really, really long interviews on the record. When you're talking to a journalist, we have these three terms, right? There's on the record, and there's off the record, and there's on background. So when you're on background or when you're off the record, you are just giving them information that they can know and that might help them, you know, guide their story. And especially if they're going to be doing long-term reporting on the sex worker community, they might, that might be good information for them to have and give them a good, help them ground their perspective in reality. So that's great to do, to spend time talking to them off the record or on background. But then when you go on the record, you probably should, you already know what you want to say, because you already know what their story is about. You know what kind of quotes they're looking for from you by the time you get to that point. And you know what your talking points are. Sometimes when you're talking to reporters, they will try to, like, in the middle of the interview, they'll try to, like, throw you off and make you talk about something completely different and salacious and sexy or dramatic, right? And you don't have to do that. I learned from Maxine, whenever they ask her, questions like that, she just smiles and says, "Oh, I don't do personal interviews." That's a good line to have. You can say, "I don't want to talk about that. I'm not here to talk about that." But you don't have to talk about anything. You don't have to answer any questions. If you do have talking points that you are trying to promote, you should end everything you say with those talking points. And sometimes they'll keep asking different questions because they're trying to get you to say what they want you to say. Keep saying what you want to say, because that's the whole reason you're doing it, right? And when you get quoted saying something that, like, when you get quoted in an article that just turns out awful, like, it's awful, it's on Google forever, and it's always there. So don't let them do it to you.
Yeah, I mean, everybody who has spoken to the media at some time usually has been misquoted, or, we've had what we've said taken out of context and it sounds terrible. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. But, and those of us who are veteran, media watchers and readers and participators can clearly see when somebody has their quote has been taken out of context. And with journalists, it's kind of like talking to the cops. Anything that you say can and will be used against you at some point. So it's good to have whatever talking points that you want to have. I mean, you can. That's why it's important to have your primary purpose. You can pick out what's important to you. What are the issues that are important to you? And when in answering questions from journalists, you can always end with your talking point. Make it one big, huge, long sentence so it's harder to edit you out. That's something that I learned. You can stand in front of the mirror. We do a lot of selfies in our industry. We want to look good. You want to look good when you're on TV, or when you even are doing a radio interview, for example, in studio. They might bring in a media person to take your picture while you're doing that interview. So you always want to look good. Some of the things that I learned is as Tara said, if they start asking you questions beyond the scope of what their article is about, like how old you are, or how long you've been working in the business, or how much do you charge, those are questions I never answer, and you shouldn't feel obligated to answer those questions either. Sometimes the media, like the general public, will approach us as public people. That everybody in the public sphere, especially with all the social media now, is public property. It's all fodder for the public, and you don't have to play that. You can definitely set down your own boundaries and don't feel obligated to answer any questions that you don't want to, and it's totally okay. But that's why it's good to have your talking points. And like Tara said, when those reporters contact you, they will definitely tell you what their topic is. They've already decided what their topic is. So things you can ask reporters, either whether they're journalists or they're TV people, is what's your deadline? When is your article due? Maybe you don't have time to drop everything that you have going on in your life and speak to that reporter. You can ask them, can I get a link to the article when it comes out? Can you send it to me in email? Can I get your card? Can I get your contact information? You definitely, if you're being contacted by a reporter who says that they are doing an article, say, for example, Playboy, for example, the real life story, I was contacted by somebody who said that they were doing an article for Playboy, wanted to talk about sexual assault. Well, and I can think of other instances too. You go to contact the editor, ask them, who is your editor? I want your editor's name, phone number, and email address. Contact that editor and say, have you been on contract with a reporter who is doing a story on this? If so, when is this article due? So you want to verify who these people are that are contacting you. Make sure that they're real people, they're really on contract, they're just not independent people that are thinking about doing a story that they're going to pitch to a national publication when, they really are just, they might be doing that. But the thing is are you going to spend an hour talking to somebody who doesn't have a track record of reporting on our issue, or the likelihood of getting that article published? So those are some of the things you want to think about when you're dealing with reporters. You definitely want to get their name, phone number, information. You want to start a reporter contact list. We all have reporter contact lists of reporters that we've talked to. When you see articles online or in print that you think have done a good job on our topic, you want to collect that reporter's name and contact details. If there's media that you don't like, that you've seen, that you think is not dignified and doesn't bring a balanced voice on our issues, you want to make a note of who that person is too, because you never want to talk to them. So Tara, what else do you want to talk about here in terms of doing radio or TV interviews?
So, yeah. Should we just talk about like some of the bad media experiences
Yeah.
we've had so that people cannot repeat our mistakes?
That's awesome.
So it's really important when you do, well, any kind of media, but especially like with live radio and TV, they can lie to you to try to get you to do the interview, and you should go and watch their old shows, listen to their old shows. I had a woman call me one time from this live morning radio show, and she was so nice, and she was like, don't worry, it's live, but we can I'll give you a list of questions and we can plan what we're going to say before. And then I got on the radio with her, and she did not ask any of the questions that were on the list. She didn't follow the script at all, and she was just like, well, don't you think it's sex workers' fault if they get raped? Like, shouldn't we blame them if they're putting themselves out there and they're getting raped? So watch their old things so that you know what, if they're going to be like that. If I had listened to her old shows, I definitely would have seen that coming. And I remember, like, I don't know, a long time ago, the Tyra Banks show was contacting a lot of people to be on these live talk shows. And I remember I knew of a couple people that went and did it, and they got edited out. Their stories, their sentences were clipped so that it sounded like, and spliced together so that it sounded like they weren't, like they said things that they didn't say. They put the beginning of this sentence and the end of that sentence, and they moved the camera angles. So, those are things to be aware of.
Yeah, I think that doing live radio or TV when you're new to doing media is extremely difficult, and agreeing to it is pretty, it can be pretty hard. So it's best, especially if you're doing radio, you can write out your talking points ahead of time so that you can read them on the air and stay on point with what you want to talk about. And, once again, when an interviewer asks you a question, you can respond to that interview's question, but end with your talking point. There's lots of stuff available about how to do good interviews, and so then you can learn in turn how to be a good interviewee. And that's what you want to spend some time and look at, how to do that. How can you stay on point and not get drawn off by these people who have their own agenda with us. And sorry, I'm just trying to get back to my talking points. I don't know where. Or then what happened to my talking points? I lost them, darn it. I wrote it
So
down.
sometimes we do want to tell stories that are, a little more than a talking point. And, you might be telling a story to illustrate a point, or you might be telling a story because, like, something has happened. And that's what the media that you're doing is about. And a lot of times, especially with, stories that are traumatic, we can get really lost in like these details, and we want to tell the story in an honest way, and we want to put all of this, information into the story, and then people ask questions, and then the next thing you know, you're like completely lost. Um, and it's really normal for that to happen, especially with, stories that were traumatic when they were happening. Like, our thinking is going to be disorganized about them anyways. Um, but don't let that happen. Just like stop before you ever get in there and think about how to summarize the story in a couple sentences. You know, this happened and that happened. You don't have to talk about the details of it happening. You can if you want to. But you don't have to, get into all of these details. You can use these really big summarizing words, right? Um, to tell a story without getting lost in the details or getting like pulled off by the reporter into a whole different direction than where you were trying to go.
Well, most media today, like on radio or TV, is recorded. So it's like Tara said, they're going to go in and chop it up and make it, what they want to say. You have to know that for TV, if you spend 15 minutes talking to a reporter with a camera, they're only going to take out maybe a sentence or two of what you said.
And it's going to be the most sensationalist sentence that you said.
Yeah. Also, so, if it's going to be sensationalist, make it sensationalist count in your, make it count for your corner, for what, your goals, what your media goals are for whatever the topic is that you're talking about. Um, I think that if it's going to be radio, a lot of times that's going to be edited out too. And so there's a big difference between being out on a protest and having a TV person or a radio person stick a microphone in your face for a soundbite that's only going to come out to, 15 seconds or 30 seconds or so, as opposed to going into a studio and sitting down with a regular host who has a regular show that you're going to be interviewed for, and so you can ask all the questions. Is this going to be a 15-minute piece in the end? Is it going to be a 10-minute piece? A lot of times reporters are not going to give you all the questions that they're going to ask you in writing, in email. I mean, that's just not usually going to happen. A lot of reporters are on deadline, so it has to be a very quick response when you are contacted by a reporter. And if there's other people that you have that you think that will bring a similar voice or another weighted experience to help support the story, then you should, call that person and say, hey, I got this reporter. He or she is doing a report on this, and we think, that your story and your voice, should contribute to the story. So, that hookup has to happen super, super fast. And those kinds of things come up when you are doing press releases. And Tara, did you want to talk a little bit about the use of press releases?
Yeah, so you should have probably a press list. And if you don't have one, you can start one by contacting like anybody, me or Maxine or somebody in your area probably will have a better local press list for your area. But if you are just, a group or a person who's wanting to be heard, you should, send out press releases probably like once a month so that those local media people have an idea of who you are and what is going on in your locality around the issues. And then sometimes that'll lead to them calling you when other things happen. But another thing that I've seen happen sometimes is there'll be like an emergency, right? Like something has happened, something awful has happened, and you want to get media attention to it, and you've never done media before. And I really would encourage you, if that happens, to pick somebody to be your media person, whether it's a member of your group or maybe you want to like ask somebody outside of your group who has more media experience to be the media person. Um, but whoever is going to do the media, you need to figure out what the talking points are going to be. What this thing has happened, what do you want to say about the thing, and what are the take home points that you want people to understand or that you want people to do after hearing about the thing. And those are the things to talk about. Sometimes, you try to bring a lot of attention to like something that's happened and you don't have all that media experience and you have like 20 different people talking to the media and they're all talking about different things, or they're all kind of getting distracted by reporters and talking about like completely something that doesn't even have anything to do with whatever it is that has happened, right? So get together as a group and figure out what your talking points are, and either appoint a media person or a few media people to do interviews, but make some kind of agreement to stick to your talking points.
Yeah, I think talking points are really, really important, just to have a general sense of, why the media is going to be interested in talking to you or talking to your group. I mean, in terms of representing a group, you can be pretty limited to about, what you're going to be saying, because you're representing a group, and you want to make sure that if you are representing a group, that what you're saying has group support. Um, and if you're an individual person, you can just say that. It's okay to be an individual person and want to have say and impact on the media and impact on a bunch of these issues that are facing. And doing the press release regularly is a good way to do that. There's a lot of local training that you can get around media in your own neck of the woods. There's a lot of other types of groups who are doing media, social justice groups, or the medical marijuana group. They've really done a great job of taking their criminalized activity into the legal realm, and they've done that with some training in media. So there's a lot of different types of media training out there. So there's a lot to gain access to, and if you have any questions. We're going to post this on YouTube, so you can post your questions in the comments section. We're going to post a bunch of links to other supporting media that talk about different aspects of supporting media. And what else are we going to post regarding support stuff on the media?
I'm going to post a video of this woman who owns a daycare, and there was a criminal on the loose or something, and she got interviewed on live TV, and she kept saying her talking point, they kept trying to get her off of it, and she kept saying it. I think that's the most important video for anybody who's going to talk to the media to watch.
Awesome. Yeah, so we'll look forward to hearing your feedback on this video and on the information that we've presented, and answering any other further questions that you have. And we'll be catching up with you again to share our experience and knowledge about moving the whorenation forward. So thanks for watching.